97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco.
My first allegiance is what will be best for the Philadelphia Eagles and our fans for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back. Go to ilovelylback.com. Call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back. Proud sponsor of Football at 4. A lot to get into right now. The Eagles are interviewing another head coach today. Now, they had requested to interview Kellen Moore. He is now in for an interview today, but he is also following. He's like waiting in the waiting room. You're sitting there looking at your watch like, how much longer are they going to talk to this Dennis Allen? Because he is in for an interview today as well. Now, like if you were Dennis Allen and Kellen Moore, how do you feel if you're only getting these short little interviews and Josh McDaniels got like a 9-hour extravaganza?
You got to think it's a positive and a step in the right direction if your ultimate goal is to eventually become a head coach, right? You can say to the next guy, hey, look, I interviewed with the Eagles back in this. You just add it to your resume. So, you know, I
always take the interview.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm like, you're obviously saying, I'm not as good as a candidate, or they're not taking me as serious as those guys.
So, maybe they're trying to get to their tea time. It's like, God damn, do I stay for this interview or do I go hit the links? Maybe they don't even stay.
Right. You open up the Mr. Moore, Mr. Laurie will come. Mr. Moore, Mr. Laurie, Mr. Moore's not out there. That's what's going on today. Dennis Allen is also in. He is the defensive coordinator for the Saints, who had a really good year defensively. He was the head coach in Oakland with the Raiders for a while. That didn't go so well. Let's get the opinions of Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, 97.3 ESPN.com. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Andrew, what's up, man?
Hey, Mike, how are you, man?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm pretty mystified at this head coaching search. Not that I care about the speed of when they hire them, just the amount of guys that they're bringing in here. And what do they try to accomplish by interviewing literally every Tom, Dick, and Harry who's had a coaching position? It's like, hey, let's go get Dennis Allen. I'm wondering, do you know if all these guys have the same agent?
Well, all right. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of perceive this, and there's a lot to unpack. So what I would say is they could be looking to get some intel on these guys' various systems and how they do things or how they would approach a certain situation. Or you could get a lot of guys that maybe they don't like being told who their quarterback's going to be. Maybe they don't like being told that, hey, you're not going to have you're only going to have X amount of say because, if they're going to go down, you want to go down swinging. If you're a head coach, you want to be able to pick the guys. You want to be able to draft the guys. You want to be able to stand on that. And they might not be happy with the answers that they're getting from the Eagles. And, a lot of guys, they might be being told that you have to make it work with Carson Wentz. And, of course, they may be thinking if it doesn't work with Carson Wentz, then what? Then am I going to get the Doug Peterson treatment or what? Because I'm doing what you guys are telling me to do. So I think it – and I also think, Mike, that they never anticipated having a coaching search. So they were kind of caught off guard, and they don't really know what they're looking for. So they figure, hey, let us cover all our bases and bring all these guys in and kind of weigh our options that way.
I think you're definitely right there. They were behind the game. They didn't think they were going to be in the game. So now they're going almost overboard in the game. Let's talk about the guys that are in right now. Kellen Moore, Dennis Allen. Do either of these guys have a shot?
I think Kellen Moore has a decent shot, a better shot than Dennis Allen, in my opinion. He's a young coordinator. Yes, he's very young, and we talk about the youth and how are you going to how is that going to translate to a veteran locker room? How is that going to really resonate with a locker room? And I think that's fair. But when you look at Kellen Moore's resume, he's a very sharp guy. He's smart. Dallas retained him with Mike McCarthy retained him with his staff. He's done some good things with Dak Prescott. He's just they always have an efficient offense, and he's just highly regarded. And he kind of sees the offense through the eyes of the quarterback because he was one. And his school, Boise State, reached out to him to even bring him in as a coach. So, I mean, he'd have some coaching pedigree. He hasn't been coaching very long, granted, but I think that it would be an interesting hire. Dennis Allen, defensive coordinator, like I said, he had some history with the Raiders. He did some nice things. He was a former secondary coach. You saw what he did with the secondary with the Saints, developed some younger players there. I mean, I think that was more so as a feeler. I don't necessarily know if he's going to get any legitimate consideration, hence the shorter interviews and with a candidate like that. So that's just a little bit of background on some of those guys.
Okay, now Todd Bowles was in yesterday, and apparently, there's some people in the organization that obviously thought that he did really well. Where do you kind of rank Bowles? I think most people think Josh McDaniels is the favorite. More on that. We'll get your opinion on that. But where do you kind of slot Todd Bowles and his candidacy right now?
I think Todd Bowles is fairly high on their list because, look, when you look at the team in its current state right now, they really need they could use a hardened coach, one that's been through a lot, one that's going to really has a commanding presence. It's going to have the respect of the entire locker room. And Todd Bowles is a guy that he was very well received when he was there the first time in Philadelphia. He has a defensive mind. He's able to kind of really relate to his players, and he just seems like an easygoing coach, but one that carries an authority. And I think that's what the Eagles need right now is some sort of structure. Piggybacking off of that article that kind of came out over the weekend, that really painted a picture of what's been going on and the disarray in that locker room. So I think he is kind of fairly high up there, and he doesn't strike me as somebody that's going to particularly rock the boat with a Howie Roseman or a Jeffrey Lurie. So I think that also is another thing that puts him higher on that list.
Do you think that Josh McDaniels can be that guy even after the controversy in Denver and some of the stuff in New England?
Yeah, Hunter. So Josh McDaniels, to me, I actually would find that hire to be particularly intriguing for the Eagles because, well, once you get past the Denver Broncos situation, yeah, there's some baggage there. There's plenty of stuff out there if people want to look that up. And he did not evaluate. He had poor evaluation on the quarterback. Tim Tebow was not an NFL quarterback, and he kind of hitched his wagon to Tebow. And then obviously one of the more damning things was when he backed out of the Indianapolis job in 2018 after they had already announced it. That's just something that you can't do. That's obviously does not. You're going to burn a lot of bridges in the NFL pulling something like that. But when you really look at what he's done with New England, and Adam Kaplan really brought this up in the latest podcast of his role in kind of bringing up that slot position to prominence with the Patriots, with Wes Welker, with working in the middle of the field with Rob Gronkowski, really instrumental in some of the pass concepts that they have there. And the thing that I find most interesting is that, yeah, he's 44 years old. He's not necessarily a veteran coach, but he's not afraid to get after it. He yelled at Tom Brady. He would stay on Tom Brady, and they had their battles. But if you're Howie Roseman, that would be your worst nightmare, having a guy like Josh McDaniels come into your franchise, because he's not going to take a lot of flack. He's not going to take any insubordination or undermining from his players, and he's going to want to have some say. So I think he's going to, there's an authoritative presence with him.
And right now, there a lot of people think. I know Jeff was on yesterday, and he said he thinks he's the favorite in the clubhouse, and that people are basically saying that that's who the Eagles want. And now there's some reports today that Roseman is trying to sell Lurie on it. It almost sounds like that's ass backwards. Roseman is okay giving up some of the personnel power because McDaniels is going to want to come in and have some say, and that Roseman's okay with that, but he's got to almost sell Lurie on that. You buying that?
No, I don't buy that, and I'm more so. I think that's totally backwards. I think that they would have to that Lurie would have to sell Howie on that, knowing that this is the coach that's going to command a lot of control, and you're going to kind of have to get out of the way and let him do his thing, and otherwise, this whole thing could kind of combust by week 10 if you kind of overstep your bounds, so to speak, and if we had this sort of an agreement. And I think that they're trying to. I think if anything, they would have to sell Howie on that, given Howie's reputation.
What if he brings Mayo over as defensive coordinator? Now the Eagles have an opportunity to land two guys they value as head coach material. Would that intrigue you even more?
Yeah, Hunter, I heard you bring that up yesterday when speaking to Jeff, and I think that would be the best case scenario if you bring in a Josh McDaniels. Get a guy like Gerard Mayo, who you brought in, who you interviewed already. He's someone that's been fast-tracked in the NFL. He's very highly regarded in New England. He's always been a coach he just completed, I believe, his second season as the inside linebackers coach. He's someone that people have a lot of respect for, speak very highly of. He's played the game at a high level, so he's only 34 years old, but when he stands up there and speaks, guys are going to listen. And I know that Matt Patricia has had, varying success after he left the Patriots. And, it's a lot of the guys that leave New England don't necessarily have that kind of success. But based on what you're seeing and hearing from Gerard Mayo, I think that if you're comparing a Matt Patricia or a Gerard Mayo as potential candidates to come along with McDaniels, I think that Mayo would be a fantastic hire.
Interestingly enough, Andrew DiCecco, by the way, is here for Football at 4. There's a lot of people that think that Belichick and New England is grooming him to take over for Belichick when he, in fact, whenever that is, he's only 34 years old. So even if he's there for 5 more years, he'd still be a pretty young guy when he takes over that job. That's how highly they think of Mayo up there.
Yeah, and that's something that I've written about or I tweeted about even last year, that he was going to be a guy to keep an eye on moving forward. He's been fast-tracked. You see the results with him, in his position group, and he's been calling plays. He's an inside linebackers coach, but he's calling plays. He called plays as a player. He just gets it, and he has that presence about him. And you kind of got that sense that he was very highly regarded with that Patriots organization. And then this, what you just said really backs that up.
Earlier, you touched on how damning that Jeff McClain piece was. What was your takeaway after reading that?
Well, and it's very, very consistent with what you've heard Jeff and Adam report on Inside the Birds about Carson not taking to coaching, not being receptive of criticism. Also, that Joe Santamacuito piece for Philly Voice a couple of years ago that he got blasted for. A lot of these things, you're starting to see a lot of common factors here. A lot of people are kind of echoing that article, which really built the foundation of that kind of chatter coming out of that locker room. And, Carson even went as far to admit some of that in the end of the 2018 season when he spoke with a handful of reporters that, he's not the easiest guy to coach. And he is stubborn. And that's something that Jeff and Adam have spoken about as well. But some of the things that really stuck out to me in that were, the going into in the pissing match, as they called it, with Doug Peterson, not when you're in the coaching room, when you're in the quarterback's room, and Press Taylor kind of, asks you about a certain read or why you didn't do a certain thing, and your response is, you have an excuse. It was the pass rush, or I didn't see it that way, and then you move on. You're not grilling him about that. Those are problems that you kind of assume were going on, but now you kind of see that in writing. You're like, oh, well, that makes total sense. Why you kind of see that disconnect out there.
Real quick, I want to go back to there's another name that interviewed. Or will interview for the head coaching job, and that's Nick Sirianni, who is the offensive coordinator for the Colts. He's been a wide receiver coach, which is kind of intriguing. This team has gone through those pretty plentiful. He's been a quarterback coach. So is Sirianni a real candidate? Because there's a lot of people who kind of put him on that Sean McVay level of a young, innovative guy. He worked with Andrew Luck. Then he had to kind of go to Brissett. Now he had to work with Rivers. So what do you know about him?
Well, I kind of likened him last year. I thought he was going to be a hot coaching candidate. I kind of likened him to a Matt LaFleur or Sean McVay, those young upstart coaches. He's only 39 years old. You mentioned the wide receiver background. In fact, he coached the wide receivers with the Chargers from 2016 and 2017. Keenan Allen had his best season with him as his wide receivers coach. I believe he had over 1,300 yards of receiving that year. Then he goes with Frank Reich. He was with Frank Reich with the Chargers, but he goes with them in 2018 with the Colts staff. And what really struck me is his ability to kind of make do with the players around him, play to their strengths. When you look at the receiver position, you haven't had T.Y. Hilton. He hasn't always been healthy. He's had hamstring issues in the past. You've had a guy like Zach Pascal and Mo Alley Cox, two undrafted players who he's really developed and made integral parts of that offense. And the offense really hasn't missed a beat, despite the not having a lot of stars on that offense to really go through. And I think that really speaks to his coaching intellect.
Interesting, because when his name came up, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have no idea who that even is. But, there's a lot of these guys. When Sean McVay gets hired, when you mentioned LaFleur, a lot of these guys are young, innovative, and that's what everybody seems to be looking for. But ultimately, who's the best fit? I mean, you look at Josh McDaniels. Is he, to you, the best option for where this team is in their kind of existence in terms of their roster makeup, the quarterback situation, all that? When you look at what this team needs the most, is it the Deuce Staley type leader of men? Is it an offensive mind who's worked with quarterbacks, Josh McDaniels? Is it that defensive-minded guy who will bring in an innovative coach to run the offense like a Todd Bowles? Who intrigues you the most?
Well, I would say outside of Josh McDaniels, I would say Nick Sirianni, and I'm actually surprised that his name wasn't on the list earlier in the process. But what I will say is Josh McDaniels, for this reason, yes, he's an offensive-minded guy, and that kind of aligns with Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman's vision and what they really look for in a head coaching candidate. But he also he's worked with Tom Brady, and he's worked with the best quarterback in football. And he knows how to push certain buttons on a player like Tom, who may not be the easiest guy to coach because he's been so successful for so long. If they're trying to sell him on Carson Wentz, I think that Josh McDaniels would be the best option to work with him because he's going to coach him like John DiFilippo. He's going to get after him and hopefully get the best out of Carson. So you can kind of see that play that goes back to 2017. And I just think I think when he was with Denver, he was very young. He was given a lot of power at a young age. And people grow. People go through these situations and go through this adversity, and either learn from it and improve, or you stay the same and don't get other opportunities. But I think that the fact that he's getting this opportunity, I think he's learned from his past mistakes, and we'll see. But I think given the Eagles, the current structure of the team, I think that he would make the most sense in the head coaching role.
What's your response to the people who say Deuce Staley deserves the opportunity?
I would say he's definitely beloved by the players, and that's only a part of it, Hunter. And I would say that when you hear people say that he's deserving, I would say what exactly does he do that makes him deserving for it? Because he's beloved, because he's heralded in that locker room by players that currently there and former players. Like I said, that's only part of it. But yes, he's a leader of men, and he has a ton of respect, and his voice is going to carry a lot of weight, but there's more to it than that. And I think that when you look at, he hasn't gotten any other coaching opportunities outside of the opportunities that he's had with the Eagles. So that's a little head scratching to me. I think that I still consider him a very viable option, given the large coaching search, given he has an understanding of what Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman of how they operate. There's a familiarity there. Players are going to buy in right away. There's not going to be a question of that. So I do think that he's going to be one of the three guys that it could ultimately come down to.
Now let me ask you: if Deuce Staley didn't play for the Eagles at some point, would anybody be asking for the running back coach to be promoted to head coach? Is there any other running back coach in the league that anybody is asking to be? Like, I like Deuce, and I'm not downplaying him.
He's also the assistant head coach.
That is true, and obviously they gave him that title for whatever reason, but my question really is, I guess, I don't know what Deuce does. I mean, the offense was not good. He's a part of that offensive room. If you're trying to clean out house, why would you get rid of all these other coaches and keep Deuce or make him the head coach? I mean, the offense was not good. People had problems with the running back. I don't know. I just wonder if Deuce was not a player here, a popular player here, if people would be pulling for him. And I'm not trying – look, if Deuce gets the job and he deserves it and he's the best guy out there, I will totally be okay with that. I'm just trying to find myself. I just wonder if it's not Deuce Staley played running back for the Eagles during a popular era, are people asking for the running back coach to be promoted to head coach?
Well, and I think that there's an emotional intelligence with Deuce. Guys, he's very relatable. I've seen him coach up close when he was running the Temple Pro Day, when he was running Raquel Armstead, the running back, through drills. He coaches very hard, but he gets the best out of his players. Yes, the running back rotation has been scrutinized in recent years, and that's directly tied to Deuce Staley. But I think what you say there, Mike, is very fair, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier. It's what can you pinpoint that Deuce Staley does extremely well that would allow him to vault from running backs coach / assistant head coach to head coach of a team that's really in disarray right now? You don't want to set Deuce Staley up for failure, and you don't want to set the Eagles up for failure either, because they really can't afford to be set back with this hire.
Is there a one that got away for you?
I really like Robert Sala. I thought that he had. I really liked what he was able to do with the San Francisco 49ers. I like the staff that he has in place. I love his energy, his positive energy, and I just think that that's really what the team really needed: a defensive-minded, hardened head coach with a ton of energy that was open to having other coaches around him that were going to take ownership of other areas rather than having that mindset where you want to oversee everything. I thought it would have been more of a collaborative effort with him, and I thought that his specialty is defense. So you're going to see a lot of defensive line intrigue in the draft and linebackers, and it would have been a completely new identity for an Eagles team that really needs to turn the page. So I thought he brought a lot to the table.
Is it weird to you that Dable wanted to stay as the offensive coordinator in Buffalo with the ties of Sean McDermott and his relationship with Howie and this organization? You know, there's some speculation that maybe it was like, hey, you don't want to go there. And Dable's a guy who, you know, I know Gil was very high on. A lot of people were very high on. So it's a little odd that he's staying as OC, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was a little strange to me because, and I heard Jeff mention this yesterday, which I found pretty interesting, is that, you know, Sean McDermott didn't leave on the best terms when he left Philadelphia. Maybe it had something to do with it, but I can't say for certain. But I will say this: coaches in the NFL, they talk, and word gets out. I mean, if stories are leaking from the locker room to, you know, reporters, and that's kind of a widely known issue with the Eagles. Coaches are talking about the situation and the dysfunction with that Eagles team right now. And I'm sure Sean McDermott may have said, hey, you know what? I would hold out and wait. Come back. We'll kill it again. We'll kill it another year. You'll be the top coaching candidate again, and you'll have your pick. And kind of just, you know, maybe hold off on this because it might not be the best situation for you right now, given all the problems that are permeating from that locker room.
Andrew, why no Bieniemy? And if he interviews, is it a no-brainer that he should be the guy?
I think Eric Bieniemy should. I for the life of me, Mike, I can't understand why he wasn't a more prominent candidate in this search. I really felt that. I mean, you have Andy Reid, who's willing to vouch for you. You have the resume. It's time. This guy should be a head coach, and I don't know what more he needs to do to kind of, you know, cement himself as a viable head coaching candidate. And to me, I kind of envision him going with the Houston Texans and having success there. But I don't understand why he wasn't a more prominent candidate high up on the Eagles list, because I really thought that he deserved it.
Something I'm constantly hearing is maybe we should look, and this is just from Eagles fans, but, you know, let's get away from the Andy Reid tree and try something new. And my argument to that is his tree is so successful, why would you want to look another avenue? But at the same time, I kind of understand why maybe a new identity would be great as well. So how do you view that statement?
Yeah, I think, you know, that thinking, you know, to get away from such a successful coaching tree is the contrarian thinking, but why get away from something if it's proven success? You saw the success that Doug Peterson had early on in his Eagles tenure before things spiraled out of control. And Mike Kafka handles the passing game concepts for them, and he's going to be on his way to be fast-tracked in this league. And you look at Eric Bieniemy, and, you know, the list just goes on and on. But I'm just mentioning the recent guys. You know, these guys are going to have success, you know, in their careers when they have elevated roles. So why get away from that? I mean, if it's working, if the system's proven to work, why go with an unknown? I mean, there are unknown candidates out there, like a Nick Sirianni, like that I've mentioned, that I think are are very intriguing, and I think are well deserving of a head coaching role. Like I said, I thought Nick Sirianni would have been one of the names that latched onto a head coaching spot last offseason. But I mean, there's definitely, I can understand both schools of thought.
Well, the Eagles have interviewed 10 coaches. Bieniemy's not one of them. I guess they did ask to. They haven't scheduled anything with him yet. Now, in past years, you could not interview a guy if he was still involved. They've changed that now that if the team gives you permission, you can over Zoom. So we'll see if something ends up happening. But Kellen Moore today, Dennis Allen today. For all the details on the coaching search, go to 973ESPN.com, and we'll talk more about it until they find one. This is very intriguing. More names could continue to come. They might stumble back into interviewing Doug Peterson by accident. You never know.
Yeah, you never know when this thing's turning.
At DiCecco NFL. Follow him on Twitter. I can't wait till we can start breaking down the draft. I know you're chomping at the bit for that. We will certainly get into a lot of draft talk with Andrew, and he, like all guys, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. All right, Andrew, take care, pal.
Guys, have a good one.
All right. Football at 4 brought to you by Dr. Lyle M. Back for everything from skincare to cosmetic surgery. Go to ilovelyle.back.com. Call 856-MAKEOVER for Dr. Lyle M. Back, proud sponsor of Football at 4, which is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast.